cash and priceless treasures, stolen in minutes. They planned it to perfection, struck without mercy, and some of their loot is still missing to this day. Some of the most daring crimes in history weren't in movies, they actually happened. Today, we're counting down the 8 biggest heists ever pulled off. Stories of greed, risk, and betrayal whose secrets might shock you. March 18, 2003, just hours before coalition forces began bombing Baghdad. History recorded one of its strangest and largest takeovers of cash. What looks on paper like a heist reads more like a state-ordered exfiltration. This is how it went down. In the pre-dawn dark, a convoy of trucks arrived at the Central Bank of Iraq. The man in charge of the operation was Qusay Hussein, one of Saddam Hussein's sons. He did not break in. He did not shoot his way through the doors. He walked in with a handwritten order signed by Saddam himself and a band of armed men at his back. The note instructed bank officials to release a massive withdrawal, roughly $920 million and about 100 million euros. The bank staff had little choice. In Saddam's Iraq, refusal was not an option. For more than 5 hours, terrified employees loaded bundles of cash into the waiting trucks. Pallets and pallets of $100 bills stacked like bricks. At least 3 tractor trailers drove off from the bank that morning. The exact number of people involved on the ground is not precisely recorded, but the operation involved the bank's vault staff, convoy drivers and guards, and Qusay's armed escort, a tight state-controlled team rather than the gang of robbers you'd see in a movie. Contemporary reports and later investigations put the total at nearly $1 billion in cash. Some versions list the withdrawal at approximately $900 million in US bills, plus roughly $100 million in euros. Call it $1 billion at the time, which, adjusting for 2 decades of inflation, sits around roughly 1.5 to nearly $2 billion in today's money. A staggering amount moved with the authority of a dictator's signature. What happened next reads like a mystery that never closes. US troops and investigators recovered a huge cache of cash in the weeks after Baghdad fell. Different reports give slightly different totals, but US forces found between $650 million and nearly $780 million stashed in Saddam's palaces, residences, and in other hidden places. Bank records and follow-the-money investigations helped trace some funds into foreign accounts and into property and assets abroad. Intelligence reports and interviews with regime insiders also pointed to where some sums were hidden or transferred, but the chaos of invasion, the speed of the regime's collapse, and the complexity of international financial channels meant a lot of cash simply disappeared without a clear paper trail. Even now, 2 decades later, the central bank withdrawal remains a mixture of record, scandal, and unanswered questions. How much of that money still sits hidden? Who ultimately benefited? After the fall of Baghdad, a number of regime figures were captured, and Saddam Hussein himself was found and later tried, convicted, and executed in 2006. Qusay Hussein did not live to stand trial. He was killed in July 2003 during a US-led raid. Why this matters as a story is twofold. First, it is technically the largest single withdrawal of currency in modern times. Nearly $1 billion moved under the name of a head of state. Second, it exposes the blurry line between a heist and a sanctioned seizure. This was not a gang with masks. It was the state taking its own treasury and carrying it away in trucks because the ruler feared he would not be there to protect it. It was just after midnight on March 18, 1990, when 2 men dressed as Boston police officers walked up to the side entrance of the Isabella Stewart Gardner Museum. The guards inside weren't alarmed. It wasn't unusual for police to make rounds in the area after St. Patrick's Day celebrations. But within minutes, what started as a calm night turned into the largest art theft in world history. The 2 officers told the guards they were responding to a disturbance. The guards, following protocol, let them in. Big mistake. The moment the supposed cops entered, they ordered the guards to step away from their desk and face the wall. In a matter of seconds, both were handcuffed, their mouths taped. They were taken to the museum's basement, where they were tied up and left for the rest of the night. For the next 81 minutes, the thieves roamed freely through the galleries. They seemed oddly selective, skipping some masterpieces while targeting others. They cut paintings straight out of their frames, smashing glass cases and rolling canvases with little regard for preservation. Among the stolen treasures were the Concert by Vermeer, one of only 34 paintings ever created by the Dutch master; The Storm on the Sea of Galilee by Rembrandt, his only seascape; A Lady and Gentleman in Black, another Rembrandt; Chez Tortoni by Edouard Manet; sketches and objects by Degas, and a bronze eagle finial from the top of a flagpole. In total, 13 pieces of art vanished that night. The estimated value at the time was 200 million. But today, those works are valued at over 600 million, making it the most valuable art heist in history. When museum staff arrived the next morning, they found the guards still tied up, the frames empty, and the alarm tapes missing. The FBI launched an immediate investigation, but the thieves had left almost no trace. They didn't trigger the motion detectors in several rooms and appeared to know the museum's layout, leading many to believe it was an inside job or that someone had fed them details. For years, investigators chased leads that stretched from Boston's underworld to the Italian mafia. Some believe the paintings were used as collateral in drug trades or hidden to negotiate leniency in criminal cases. Rumors surfaced that the stolen art had made its way overseas to Ireland, to Japan, to South America, but none were ever verified. Despite countless tips, no one has ever been charged for the theft. Both of the original suspects, believed to have been involved, died in the early 2000s. The FBI announced in 2013 that they knew who committed the heist, but refused to reveal names due to lack of evidence and the ongoing effort to recover the art. To this day, the empty frames still hang in the Gardner Museum, exactly where the stolen paintings once were, a haunting reminder of what was lost. More than 3 decades later, none of the 13 artworks have ever been found. The museum continues to offer a $10 million reward for information leading to their recovery, the largest private bounty ever offered by a museum. The Gardner heist isn't just a story of stolen art, it's a story of obsession, mystery, and betrayal. A heist so clean, so bold, and so unresolved that it has become part of Boston's legend, forever marking March 18, 1990, as the night beauty itself was stolen and never returned. A crime so sophisticated that it's still studied by investigators around the world. The Antwerp Diamond Heist, often called the heist of the century, wasn't a smash and grab job. It was a masterclass in patience, planning, and precision. The story begins in Antwerp, Belgium, home to the world's largest diamond district. Inside a heavily fortified building known as the Antwerp Diamond Center, more than $3 billion worth of gems pass through every year. It was considered impenetrable, guarded by magnetic sensors, infrared heat detectors, seismic alarms, Doppler radar, and 24-hour video surveillance. But to a man named Leonardo Notarbartolo, an Italian thief and skilled con artist, impenetrable was just another word for worth the effort. Leonardo had been posing as a diamond dealer for more than 2 years before the heist. He rented an office in the Diamond Center, gained access to the vaults, and built a reputation of trust among real traders, all while secretly studying every detail of the building's security. By February 2003, his plan was ready. He assembled a crew of 4 other men, each an expert in their craft, a locksmith, an electrician, a mechanic, and a security systems specialist. Together, they formed a team that would pull off the most daring theft Europe had ever seen. On February 15th, the eve of Valentine's Day, the gang entered the Diamond Center through the garage. Using a key copied months earlier, they unlocked the security gate and slipped inside without triggering a single alarm. Their method was genius. They covered motion sensors with hairspray, used aluminum sheets to block heat detectors, and bypassed the magnetic lock with a homemade tool. Once inside the vault room, they worked by flashlight, carefully opening 123 out of 189 safety deposit boxes. Each one was packed with diamonds, gold, cash, and jewelry. In total, they stole an estimated $100 million worth of valuables, though some reports suggest the real figure was closer to $500 million in today's value. When the staff returned the next morning, they found the vault door wide open. The alarm wires were cut and dozens of boxes emptied with surgical precision. It was as if ghosts had robbed the place. For days, police had no leads until a farmer in the nearby town of Zaventem stumbled upon a pile of burning trash in the woods. Inside the ashes were receipts, diamond envelopes, and surveillance tape fragments from the diamond center. The mistake: Leonardo's DNA was found on a half-eaten sandwich left at the scene. By February 2003, police had arrested Leonardo. During interrogation, he admitted to planning the heist, but claimed they only stole around $20 million and was set up by a larger criminal organization. Authorities never believed him, and most of the diamonds were never recovered. Leonardo was sentenced to 10 years in prison, but served only a portion before being released. His crew? Scattered. Some vanished entirely, and the loot possibly stashed in foreign banks or traded on the black market and remains unaccounted for to this day. Even now, the Antwerp Diamond Heist stands as the most sophisticated and successful diamond theft in history. No violence, no alarms, no witnesses, just patience, precision, and flawless timing. It was, in every sense, a perfect crime, almost. It was the year 1976 in Beirut. The city was in chaos. Lebanon was deep in the middle of a brutal civil war. The streets were filled with militias, bombings, and lawlessness. While most people were trying to survive, one group of men saw an opportunity worth $50 million, the equivalent of over $250 million today. The British Bank of the Middle East, located on Beirut's bustling Hamra Street, was one of the most secure financial institutions in the region. Its massive underground vault was built to withstand bombs, fire, and any kind of break-in. But no one anticipated a heist happening during a civil war. That's when a mysterious group, believed to be a mix of Palestinian Liberation Organization members and professional safecrackers, made their move. They weren't after politics. They were after money, gold, and jewels. For weeks, the city was in blackout mode due to heavy fighting. The bank's security was weak, communication lines were down, and the nearby area was deserted. Under the cover of the war, the gang broke into a church next door to the bank and began drilling through the shared wall into the vault. Using explosives, welding torches, and professional tools, they cut through reinforced concrete and steel, slowly breaking into the most secure vault in Lebanon. When they finally broke through, they found hundreds of safe deposit boxes packed with gold bars, foreign currency, jewels, and negotiable securities. The thieves looted everything they could carry. By the time anyone realized what had happened, they had disappeared, leaving behind only debris and silence. In total, it's estimated that $20 to $50 million was stolen. An astronomical figure for the year 1976, worth over $250 million today. It was one of the largest bank robberies in the world at the time. Because of the ongoing war, the authorities couldn't investigate properly, the police were powerless, and the army was divided. Rumors spread that the operation was backed by high-ranking Palestinian Liberation Organization officials and that the loot was used to fund military operations and black market arms deals. To this day, no one has ever been arrested and none of the stolen assets have been recovered. The case remains unsolved, one of the few robberies in history where the chaos of war became the perfect cover for a multi-million-dollar crime. The British Bank of the Middle East heist wasn't just about money. It was about timing and taking advantage of a crumbling system when power, order, and accountability no longer existed. In the middle of a war zone, while bullets flew over Beirut, a group of thieves carried out one of the boldest heists ever recorded and vanished without a trace. It was a cold winter morning in New York, December 11th, 1978, at 3 a.m., a group of men wearing ski masks and holding guns entered the Lufthansa cargo terminal at John F. Kennedy International Airport. What they pulled off that night would go down as one of the most legendary heists in American history, worth $60 million at the time and nearly $30 million in today's money. The mastermind behind the heist was Jimmy Burke, an associate of the Lucchese crime family, the same man who inspired Robert De Niro's character Jimmy Conway in Goodfellas. Burke got the inside scoop from a Lufthansa employee named Louis Werner, who was deep in debt and desperate. Werner revealed that millions in untraceable cash and jewelry from overseas flights were being stored in the airline's high-security vault at JFK. On the night of the heist, 6 armed men drove a stolen Ford van to the airport. They overpowered the security guards, tied them up, and made their way into the vault area. Using Werner's detailed layout and timing, they moved swiftly, disabling alarms and forcing employees to cooperate. The robbers loaded $5 million in cash and $875,000 US in jewelry into their van, all without firing a single shot. It took them less than 90 minutes. Then, just like that, they vanished into the freezing New York night. By morning, the FBI was swarming the airport. It was the largest cash robbery ever on US soil at the time. The entire country was stunned. No forced entry, no alarms triggered, no one seriously hurt, just precision, planning, and betrayal. But then came the cleanup, and that's where everything fell apart. Jimmy Burke, paranoid about being caught, started eliminating everyone who could link him to the heist. Over the next few months, several of his crew members were found dead, shot, strangled, or disappeared completely. The bodies piled up and the FBI closed in. The only person ever convicted in connection with the heist was Louis Werner, the Lufthansa insider, for planning and providing information. But no one who physically took part in the robbery was ever convicted. Jimmy Burke himself was never charged for the Lufthansa job, though he was later sentenced to life in prison for other murders. Out of all the millions stolen, only a fraction was ever recovered. The rest, cash, gold, and jewels, vanished, believed to have been laundered through mob fronts and offshore accounts. The Lufthansa heist remains one of the most notorious crimes in American history, a blend of mafia loyalty, greed, and betrayal. It showed how even the most sophisticated plan can crumble, not because of the police, but because of the people you trust. It was a crime so bold and so bizarre that the media dubbed the thieves the bad grandpas. Because when the culprits were finally caught, they weren't young, dangerous criminals, they were pensioners. Over the Easter weekend, April 2nd to 5th of 2015, a group of elderly men, all seasoned criminals in their 60s and 70s, pulled off one of the biggest burglaries in British history, stealing £14 million, or roughly $20 million in cash, diamonds, and jewelry. The story begins in London's Hatton Garden, the heart of the UK's Diamond District. While most people were home celebrating Easter, the thieves were deep underground, drilling through a thick concrete wall of the Hatton Garden Safe Deposit Company, their target, a vault used by jewelers and wealthy clients to store valuables. The mastermind was Brian Reeder, a 76-year-old known in the underworld as the Master. He had been part of major robberies in the past, including the infamous Brinksmat job of 1983. His crew included Terry Perkins, 67, Daniel Jones, 60, John Kenny Collins, 75, and Carl Wood, 58, all ex-convicts with long rap sheets. Their plan was daring and meticulously timed. On Thursday, April 2nd, they entered the building dressed as workmen, carrying industrial drills, crowbars, and wheelie bins. They disabled the elevator, climbed down the shaft to the basement, and drilled a massive hole 20 inches thick through a concrete wall leading to the vault. But when they finally got through, the shelves of safety deposit boxes were just out of reach. Their drill hadn't gone far enough. Frustrated and exhausted, they left the scene, planning to come back better prepared. 2 days later, on Saturday night, they returned with the right tools and finished the job. Over several hours, they emptied 73 deposit boxes, stuffing bags with diamonds, gold, and cash. No alarms, no guards, no witnesses. By Sunday morning, they were gone. When employees arrived after the long weekend, they found the vault in shambles, a hole in the wall, broken boxes everywhere, and millions in valuables missing. For weeks, the heist dominated UK headlines. Police called it the work of professionals, but what shocked everyone came next. After reviewing hours of CCTV footage, investigators identified a white van, rented under John Collins's name, parked near the building. From there, detectives pieced together surveillance footage, phone records, and DNA, eventually tracking the entire gang. By May 2015, almost every member of the crew had been arrested. They were caught meeting in pubs, dividing the loot, and boasting about how easy it was. In 2016, the gang was sentenced to a combined 34 years in prison. However, a large portion of the stolen goods, nearly 2/3, was never recovered. The Hatton Garden Heist became a pop culture sensation, inspiring documentaries, movies, and endless jokes about Britain's oldest gang. This story motivated movies like King of Thieves, The Hatton Garden Job, and Hatton Garden: The Heist. But beneath the humor lies a sobering truth. It wasn't just the audacity of the crime that made headlines. It was the irony that Britain's greatest heist was pulled off not by young masterminds, but by grandfathers who refused to retire from a life of crime. On 26 November 1983, at Unit 7, Heathrow International Trading Estate, London, the bullion was being stored overnight before shipment to Hong Kong. 6 armed men carried out the raid with help from an inside man, security guard Anthony Black, who supplied information and key impressions. Key names later tied into the mess included Mickey McAvoy, Brian Robinson, and a network of fencers and launderers such as Kenneth Noy and others who handled the gold afterwards. At 6:40 that morning, the gang forced entry. They terrorized staff, pouring petrol over victims and threatening to set them alight until vault combination numbers were handed over. The robbers expected cash, perhaps a few million in pesetas. Instead, they found around 6,800 bars of gold, about 3 tons, plus platinum, diamonds, and travelers' checks. Official tally at the time, £26 million worth of gold, diamonds, and cash. That made it Britain's biggest bullion theft. A fraction was found or traced back, some smelted and mixed back into legitimate stocks, but the majority remains missing. Lloyd's of London paid out the insurance claim. Police did make arrests and secure convictions. Anthony Black, the guard, confessed and was jailed. Mickey McAvoy and Brian Robinson were convicted of armed robbery and given long sentences. Later, prosecutions targeted the laundering network. People like Kenneth Noy were convicted of conspiracy to handle stolen goods. Others involved in smelting, VAT fraud, and laundering were jailed in later trials. One crucial early lead: neighbors spotted a white-hot crucible in a garden hut being used to melt metal soon after the raid. That tip helped police link suspects and track laundering routes. Still, huge amounts never surfaced. The heist launched decades of investigations, violent feuds, more crimes tied to the loot, and a cultural legend. From claims that smelted gold re-entered the legitimate market to suggestions that anyone wearing UK gold jewelry after 1983 might be wearing Brink's matte gold. The case exposed weaknesses in policing, money laundering routes, and how organized crime can burrow into legitimate markets. It was a quiet summer morning in England, the kind where nothing exciting ever happens. But on August 8, 1963, that peace was shattered by one of the most daring and perfectly timed crimes in British history. A Royal Mail train, loaded with money from Scotland, was stopped in its tracks by a gang of thieves who had no guns, no violence, just brains and timing. The train was carrying 128 mailbags filled with cash. the equivalent of 2.6 million pounds, or about 7 million US dollars at the time, which today would be worth over $60 million. It was supposed to be a normal delivery run until the gang of 15 men turned it into a legendary one. The mastermind behind the operation was believed to be Bruce Reynolds, a suave and smart career criminal with connections across London's underworld. His crew included Ronnie Biggs, Buster Edwards, Charlie Wilson, Jimmy White, and several others, all part of a group that became known simply as the Train Robbers. At 3 a.m., the robbers tampered with the railway signal system near Bredigo Bridge in Buckinghamshire. They changed the green light to red, forcing the train to a stop. When the driver, Jack Mills, got out to investigate, he was hit over the head with an iron bar, the only act of violence in the whole heist. The robbers then detached the first two carriages containing the money and moved them down the track to a secluded spot. They worked quickly and efficiently, forming a human chain to unload more than 120 sacks of cash into their waiting vehicles. Within 30 minutes, they were gone, driving off to a rented farmhouse in Leatherslade Farm, where they hid for several days, counting, dividing, and celebrating their haul. The robbers left behind something they hadn't planned for: fingerprints. Inside the farmhouse, police later discovered cups, plates, and board games the men had used while hiding out. Detectives from Scotland Yard quickly pieced together the evidence, leading to one of the largest manhunts in British history. Within months, most of the gang was arrested, including Reynolds, Wilson, and Biggs, but the trial was no small matter. It became a national obsession. In 1964, 11 men were convicted and sentenced to a combined 300 years in prison, yet the story didn't end there. Ronnie Biggs became a legend when he escaped from Wandsworth Prison in 1965 by climbing over the wall with a rope ladder and fleeing to Brazil, where he lived for decades as a free man. He even became a minor celebrity, appearing in media interviews, until he voluntarily returned to the UK in 2001, old and sick, to serve the rest of his sentence. As for the money, only a small fraction was ever recovered. The rest, millions in cash, vanished into the underworld, never to be found. The Great Train Robbery was more than a crime. It became a piece of British folklore. No high-tech gadgets, no digital hacking, just old-school planning, railway know-how, and a little bit of luck. Tell us in the comments, what story would you like to hear next? Hit the bell so you don't miss it. Thank you for watching.